Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hi.
Here with me.
Hi. The chat room has distracted me now because Brian, come on. You're the one. He posts, "Let's get ready to podcast." And now all I can think about is, welcome. Let's get ready to ADHD. And I don't care for that, but I'm such an anchor man. Like, I see text and I read it.
Yes.
So that's just how I am. How are you? You good?
I'm doing great.
You feeling good?
Yes.
We're wrapping up May. Still feels like New Year was just a few days ago.
I know.
Not sure how this is going so fast. We're talking about art therapy today on the show, and we have two people who are joining us. Shoshanah Blaiss is a member of our fantastic member of our community, and she tied us into an artist that she works with for creative care sessions. Andrea Krakovsky, who is also a delightful artist and a thoughtful practitioner of using art as a way to better integrate our emotional regulation, neurodiversity, all of these things. And so we're very excited to have them on the show. And we talk about all of the great arts. I'm curious, Nikki, what do you have an outlet right now? Do you feel like you have an artistic outlet?
Well, it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
It's puzzles or watercolor. But I'm not doing either one right now. So,
you really need to be creating a puzzle. You paint a watercolor and then make the puzzle. I can see you with a little jigsaw making all the curves.
Yeah.
You could do that. That's your next thing.
But I will tell you, Pete, after talking with Andrea and Shoshanah, I am inspired. I'm going back and I'm gonna pull my watercolors out and I'm gonna just be in the moment and paint.
Yeah, good for you.
What about you?
We talk a little bit about it in the show about my pottery, and I used to spend a lot of time in the studio when I was in high school and have a bunch of finished work that I really am quite proud of. Mm-hmm. And I didn't touch it for years and years until very recently. I went back into the studio and got some little wheel classes to get you back integrated into the clay. And it's been an extraordinary experience. And we talk a little bit about this, the act of creating, not to finish some perfect thing, but just to create and throw it away. Just the act of moving your hands. I find that an incredibly powerful and grounding exercise. So I'm really excited to talk to these folks to let you all hear what they have to say, because whatever your practice is, it lines up with the intention, which is to better ground and better align yourself inside your skin. And I think that's a really powerful message. So I'm excited to talk about it. Before we do that, head over to takecontroladhd.com to get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and we'll send you an email each time a new episode is released. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest at Take Control ADHD. But to really connect with us, head over to our ADHD Discord community. Super easy to just jump right into the general community channel. Just head to takecontroladhd.com/Discord. And you will be whisked over to the general invitation and login page. But if you're looking for a little more, particularly if this show has ever touched you or helped you understand your relationship with ADHD in a new way, you can support the show directly through Patreon. That is our listener-supported podcasting landing portal. And with just a few dollars a month, you can help guarantee that we continue to grow this show, have great guests, and continue to invest in features that really are dedicated to the community. Visit patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more. And when you hear Pete's voice get a little bit giddy, maybe a little choked up, it's because he's about to talk about his favorite invisible productivity tool. It's Text Expander. Text Expander is back, y'all. Truly one of my favorite tools in my tool chest. It is always there, running in the background, just waiting for me to type an abbreviation or a snippet in Text Expander speak. And when it sees that snippet, it goes to work, instantly expanding from just a few characters on my keyboard to words, sentences, paragraphs, entire pages of text. Indeed, a manifesto, all erupting from just a few characters. This week, we're talking about art therapy. And while I'm not much of a visual artist, I do love the written word. I've written books for clients and fiction for fun. And here's the trick I use every single time I start a big project. I build a snippet library of all the characters, people, terms, and places that will be used in the project. And I assign quick snippets to each of them. That way, I can be sure I will never misspell a single proper noun in a large project because Text Expander has my back. Constantly adding too many S's to Mississippi? No worries. Text Expander has it. Have a fantasy character name with lots of weird letter combinations and maybe a silent number 2? I'll never remember that. It's okay. Text Expander has my back there too. But it's not just for me. I'm on 2 teams that both use Text Expander, and I hope you'll explore the team features too. The way Text Expander says it, your team's knowledge is at their fingertips, and that's absolutely true. But you know what else? If I write something and I put it in Text Expander for my team, frankly, now I know that no one else will screw it up trying to recreate it, cobbling it together from old emails and such. It's easier for everyone. You can get your whole team on the same page by getting information out of silos and into the hands of everyone who needs to use it. Share your team's knowledge across departments so your team is sending a unified message to your customers and isn't spending time reinventing the wheel. Text Expander is available on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, iPad, and for listeners of the ADHD podcast, you can get 20% off your first year of service. Just visit takecontroladhd.com/textexpander, and you will be taken right over to our page on their site where you can get started. And if you get started right now, you will save 20% off. Don't forget, that's an important number, your entire first year. Make work the way your brain works by saying more in less time and with less effort using Text Expander. Our great thanks to the Text Expander team for sponsoring the ADHD podcast. All right, Nikki, let's get started. Art therapy. Andrea, Shoshanah, let us begin. I am so glad that you both are here today. We have Andrea Krakovsky, who is a teaching art therapist, and here to talk about art therapy and ADHD, and Shoshanah, Blaiss like fire, is here with us too, who is a not only a fantastic member of our own ADHD community, but also I will say generously, a grateful recipient of the work of art therapy with Andrea. Thank you both for joining us here on the show.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Nikki, you gotta set us up. How this conversation came to be is a little bit roundabout, and I'm very excited to hear the provenance of our art therapy conversation.
Yes. So Shoshanah and I were talking, and she mentioned that she was going to her art therapy appointment in the afternoon, and I'm like, art therapy? What's that? I want to know more about what you do. And so she explained a little bit of what she does and how it's helped her a little bit. And of course, the podcaster in me was like, oh, that would be a really good show, because it isn't something that you hear a lot about. You know, you hear about coaching and you hear about like traditional therapy and, everything else, medication and everything else to help manage ADHD. But you don't necessarily hear a lot about what she's doing. And so that's why I asked her, I said, hey, do you think would you want to be on the show? And do you think that you're, and I want to be very clear, Andrea, do you consider yourself a therapist?
That's a great question. So the word therapy, I think has a lot of connotations for people. It's not, the reason that I kind of steer away from it is because I think when people think of therapists, they think of something specific. Mm-hmm. And I really do like to set people up with a framework that sets them up for success and give them a little bit more of an expectation which has been challenging because this is a practice that I've kind of been, as I say, working towards my whole life. Yeah. So I have done a lot of caretaking and a lot of care work, and that's really led me to where I am today, as well as my lifelong kind of identity as an artist. So this practice is, I think, unlike other things that currently exist, and also very similar in some ways. For instance, it is a confidential space in which I'm offering emotional support to people one-on-one, but unlike other therapists, like the information that I've gathered and the ways in which that I'm bringing forth activities and tools are from my own experience, both in and outside of classrooms, working with children, and now working with adults one-on-one.
But not as a licensed practicing therapist.
I am not a licensed
and
therapist.
That I think is in the space of words matter, there is a art therapy, the way I've understood it, it is something specific. It's just, it unlocks kind of a different part of you. I'm bullish for art therapy. I think it's fantastic. But to me, and stop me when I start lying, it is about unlocking parts of yourself through predominantly the art, not so much like talk therapy, right? That's not what we're doing here.
So I would say there's a lot of cross sections in that I hold a lot of space for what folks are going through emotionally. And I want to create a container that allows people to work through those emotions and have, as I say, a soft landing spot for them. So there are people who come in and they have something very heavy that they want to work through or talk through. And what I usually do is I sit down with folks, and Shoshanah will be the first to tell you. Shoshanah, what's the first thing that we do?
We look at the feelings wheel.
There's a feelings wheel.
Yeah. Have you never seen it?
I don't know. I've never seen a feelings wheel.
The feelings wheel is used by a lot of different practitioners, and it's quite literally exactly as it sounds. It is a chart that depicts, some people will be like, can I use a word that's not on the feelings wheel?
There are so many feelings on the feelings wheel.
There's so many feelings. And I believe that giving words to what we're feeling is one of the most crucial ways we can help process them. And so being able to give language to that is one of the first steps.
Wow.
It is so interesting. So on your website, you call it creative care sessions, right? So what is it that you do in these sessions? We know that the first thing is you're looking at the feelings wheel, and then what happens?
That usually leads us into conversation. It doesn't for everybody, right? Like we all have different needs. We all have different sensory needs. We all have different capacities for conversation. And so for some folks, it will look like being in conversation for perhaps 15, 20 minutes. My sessions are 50 minutes long. So we may be in conversation. From that conversation, I'm going to find something, a question that comes to mind that helps us dig into what need can we address, right? So like when we're feeling all kinds of different emotions, and our feelings are usually layered, we don't just feel one thing at once, and recognizing that our feelings are morally neutral. So being angry is as morally neutral as being thrilled, allowing space for that feeling to occur, and then investigating what need is this pointing to? How might I be able to address that? How might I be able to give some attention to the part of me that's asking for that, whatever that thing may be? So I'll usually give people a 10-minute section of time. I'll keep the time. I give them a 2-minute notice, and they will use whatever materials that are calling to them. Sometimes I may say this really lends itself to writing, or this may lend itself more to illustration, but whatever comes out on the paper is wonderful. I call these prompts because they are exactly that. My goal is to prompt you. If that means that you are led tangentially into a different direction, that's okay. And one thing that I think is important with neurodiversity and ADHD is that there's not punishment for not answering something a specific way. I'm not looking for a specific answer, and it's important that that remain true when I'm receiving that information. So if I give somebody a prompt and it leads them down a different road, let's, without punishment, look at where that road went.
I'm stuck in dismayed and detestable on the feelings wheel.
Oh no.
I don't know what to do about that. Do you find that I mean, when you talk about materials, do you find that
Mhm.
that materials align in any way loosely with different issues? Like, so if let's say I'm dismayed and detestable, am I more likely to be able to unlock something by throwing some clay down on a wheel, or starting to collage work, or
I would say that's really personal. And there are ways that you can get out. So I do really like somatic experiencing. So in the body, I do love clay for that reason. That you mentioned is you really get to throw it down, and that can be wonderful. I will sometimes have people tear up a sheet of paper or scribble scrabble, or I will have us shake our hands. And so there are tools, exercises, and materials that I think lend themselves to allowing emotions to process through the body. Do I think that there is a specific, like, watercolors are good for anger and colored pencils are good for sadness? No.
Yeah.
Kind of defeat the purpose of what you were just saying, that there is no right or wrong way of doing it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so Shoshanah, I see you shaking your head a lot when she's talking. So I'm curious, like, are there certain forms of this that have helped, like, how has it helped you?
I think for me, the thing that has helped the most is being able to have like this variety of materials. And sometimes I do ask her, I'm like, what do you think I should use for this? Because I don't have any idea where to go. And I have collected a lot of materials, as we all tend to do. But I personally find, like, when I'm having one of my super frustrated days and I really want to, like, get something, kinesthetically, I guess, is that the right word, out, that I actually go towards my oil crayons, because I can color with them. There's like a feeling to the actual coloring, but then I can literally get my hands in there and mess with them and move them around and blend them together and, almost finger paint like a kid.
Yeah.
And that tends to be where I go with those. When I'm having like more sadness, I go to watercolor, because it feels very like tears. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And sometimes I'm really happy, and then I occasionally go for markers. But I've learned what materials I personally like and what sort of feels more like an extension of my body, versus, like, I really don't like colored pencils like I thought I would. My husband loves them. My husband also does art therapy with her. So he loves his colored pencils, and I love my watercolors and my paintbrushes. And, I don't know. That's sort of the big thing for me.
Do any of your children do it too?
They used to.
Okay.
That's actually how we met her. It was suggested. She was mostly working with kids, I think, at the time. And so 2 or 3 of my kids were doing sessions, and they were helpful. And we were like, hey, do you do adults? Like, I'm kind of jealous. And that was how we got started with it. So it's been a while now. I don't even remember how many years, 2 years, something like that.
It's been maybe 2 years.
Yeah, since we started. And it is probably, I mean, I do all kinds of different therapy and stuff. And this is the one that I talk about in my other therapies, where I'm like, I had this breakthrough this week. Like, we did this activity and I got to show it to you. And like, kind of like I was telling you on Monday about the one we did last week. And you're like, don't tell me anymore. But, when I have those moments, like, I have a lot of aha moments working with Andrea, a lot more than I've had in like decades of therapy, because I'm going to that subconscious place that I get out of my thinking brain and into, like, I don't know, she'll give me a prompt, and most of the time I will get an idea in my head instantly and be able to just go straight to it. And the times where it's not, those blocks that we have, like, the something always comes, and I have it all in a notebook, and I can now look back and review, and I write down the prompt at the bottom of the page with the date. And so I know exactly what we were doing that time. it's really helpful.
Have you found
Interesting.
any sort of trends in, I feels like you're going to hear this and it's going to sound like I'm really hammering home trying to align emotions to specific
I
art, but
did.
I'm really curious, like the idea, like when you're feeling, pressured, rushed, distracted, like the ADHD side of you, do you have a go-to that connects to your brain that you find allows you to settle?
Yeah, I think when I'm feeling that kind of like baseline anxiety and that not grounded kind of, I
Yeah.
just need to get back in my body, I tend to go with the oil
Okay.
crayons or the
Yeah.
things that are much more textural. And I actually had a 6-week period about a month or so ago where I did writing
Okay.
every week. It was something with words. It was all black and white. And after
You
like,
were writing a lot of poetry.
I was.
It was really cool.
I had like poetry. I was like, I don't have an image, but I just have things I need to get out. Or I was really
Right.
into lettering for a little bit, and doing like perspective stuff. And when I like looked back at it, because I didn't realize I had done this for like weeks in a row, I found that there was like the right and left sides of my brain were competing at that time. And there was like these conversations in my head that needed to get
Yeah.
out. And so it was one of those reflective things that after a couple weeks, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And could kind of look back at it and make even more sense out of what was happening.
So we're recording this on video for those who are listening. And so we happen to have the benefit of being able to see where everybody is. And so, Shoshanah, the stuff behind you, are those like, is that stuff you've done? Or are those your like sketches or?
This one, Andrea, was one of the very first ones we did.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones we did. This other thing was a COVID art project with my children.
I'm actually,
but I
Go
actually
ahead.
have a ton of them
Okay.
right here.
Look at that.
Yeah, they're all hanging.
Oh, it's so cool to see them.
I
really
have
is
a
very
bunch
cool.
there, and my book is over there. But yeah, I mean, I could like, these were some of the ones that we did when she was teaching me how to do like more realistic stuff, because sometimes I ask for a lesson. And we did like a mandala. So this one was really fun. She said, go around the room and find like 3 different size circles, and we traced them. And then you focus on like the activity of like coloring them in. So I challenged myself and I colored it in with watercolor. But like, this is a oil crayon one. I don't know what that prompt was, but there's others where it was more focusing on the process of like making, a certain type of pattern, and then, really kind of going to the, I don't know, less out of the thinking brain and more into the subconscious and seeing what happens.
I'm interested in both of your thoughts on this, and it's something that I have struggled with all my life, which is the idea of creating a work for the act of creating the work and not for the finished product.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that people struggle with. So I work with folks who are artists and identify as artists, in that they are like, I have this skill and I show my work at these different events and this is a part of my life. And they particularly struggle with that. And I like to emphasize it even more. And it's okay for us to create art that doesn't match our aesthetics. It's kind of my way of saying you can make ugly art, right? Like, I make art that I do not enjoy. It is simply for the sake of it. And it is challenging. It challenges the part of us that feels a desire to be perfect, that pursues perfectionism as it could be a possibility. And it challenges that part of our brains that's telling us that we're only worth what we can produce.
I think one of the things that's been really big for me is learning how to let something be unfinished. And that's a really big thing.
Oh, God, I'm
right?
like, my anxiety's peaking just hearing those words.
So, I mean, I can show you one right here. So I don't even think I put the date on it, but like, I said I was going to finish it and I never did. And I have several of those because we only get 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Mind you,
Right.
right? She's really she's strict on the time. And sometimes I'm like, I gotta get it finished. But one of the things that I think has been sort of a subtle lesson that I didn't really think of until this week is learning to let it go and learning to be okay with how it turned. Like, this is what I was able to do, and that is okay. And that's hard. That's a really hard one, especially for the perfectionist in all
for
of us,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And we're all like, I gotta do it right. And if it's not perfect, and but
it's that all or nothing mentality,
exactly.
right? That black and white thinking that either it's going to be perfect or I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah. And I think that's been one of the greatest lessons. And I mean, I tell Andrea all the time, I'm like, so you were in my head the other day and telling me like that, I deserve to do this and I deserve to take that extra time. Or if we have a day where I'm extra upset and I spend more of the time talking and don't really get to whatever the art was, she'll remind me, like, stay in your space 10 more minutes and do something for yourself. And there are times that I have done that and I have gone into the whole situation like feeling anxious, completely ungrounded, like I can't make a decision left or right. And I can feel like a physical difference at the end of it, where my hand was shaking from the anxiety and now I can draw a straight line.
Yeah.
So
it's big.
I'm curious because you mentioned a few times prompts. What's a prompt?
So a prompt is a question.
Okay.
And it's a question. Sometimes I write my prompts, or my prompts are just coming abstractly from here's a question that I think could be helpful to us. Like, for example, one of the prompts I've been working with is what ideas, people, or thoughts am I putting on a pedestal? Perhaps without realizing it. And so that's something that I think can be helpful for any number of people. I often take my prompts from where that person is at. So sometimes people will sit down and they're like, everything's okay. And sometimes people sit down and they're just like, here's everything that's going on. And I'm so stressed out and I'm so anxious. And after listening to them, I'm able to pull out a question that I think could lead us to a helpful place. My goal is not, is this to find out if something's the right or wrong thing to do, but to lean into, could this be more helpful or less helpful? Is it more helpful when I do this, or is it perhaps less helpful? And looking at things as less, especially with ADHD, especially with neurodiversity, especially with like task initiation, and moving through the world and figuring out how to structure our days, looking at the things that are truly morally neutral and recognizing that the shame is not actually a helpful motivator for us. Shame may light a fire under our butts for a couple minutes, but it doesn't keep it there. And so finding out ways that we can navigate with compassion. So the more time I spend a lot of time asking people, why does it make sense? I'll give you an example. I'm a messy person. I have always been super messy. I've really struggled to keep things organized. And when I ask myself, why am I like this? Why can't I just clean my room? Why can't I just pick up a dish and put it right in the dishwasher like I should? That's a question from shame. If I say, why is it challenging for me to pick up an item and put it away? I may come to the conclusion of, well, it doesn't have a place to go and I have so many other things like it. And I also am really stressed out and it makes sense that this would be challenging. When I give myself understanding, I give myself compassion. With that compassion comes room to navigate what might be helpful here.
That's the ADHD brain answering, the need to know why. And I think we stop. It's easy to get stuck in the distraction, frustration, overwhelm, and
just
forget that we need to ask why.
Yes,
I think that's a really valuable lesson. And getting back to this idea of unfinished work, like it took me a long time to start embracing this question, and I ended up going to a pottery class. I haven't done pottery in, I lived in the studio when I was in high school. That was my thing, and I haven't done it in decades. Went back to this class, and the class was only throwing. Like, there is nothing after that, because it's like a different class. You have to sign up for weeks long class. This was only wheel time, which means everything you create, you throw away. Everything you create in 5 minutes, it goes back into the pile to be reused. And it had not occurred to me until then that there was this act of creation, not to finish fire, glaze fire, that kind of a thing. That the act of just moving my hands was enough to ask the question, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I'm developing a new connection with my brain. It's kind of the same thing. Like, why can't I put this dish away?
It is similar to how we dance or how we might do yoga. We don't have a completed project at the end, but we do have a transformation.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Why do we do yoga? Well, it's a side hustle. Obviously, it's for my YouTube channel. Smash that like button. Yeah, no, I totally get that. That whole idea. Do you do, or do you have any sense of what is the breadth of media that you tackle? And I'm asking this as a nerd, first and foremost, because I had what I like to call a transformative experience in VR, and I'm curious if you've ever thought about that sort of work in art.
I have not thought about VR. I'm not super familiar with it, to be frank with you. I like to go for whatever is accessible to people. Yeah. So I will tell people a pencil and paper is wonderful. And if you have other materials you enjoy working with, that's great too. Most people will eventually like to get colored pencils, or usually already have some. But I don't want people to ever feel like they have to go out and buy a bunch of things in order to do this. Right. You don't. You may find that you enjoy watercolors, or as we do this, you're like, I would like to invest in a set of markers.
But so do you do this over Zoom then?
I do. I am looking to, initially I wasn't, but then the pandemic.
Right.
I am looking to move that to in person, and I'm figuring out some ways to make that possible right now. But I have found that it offers a lot of accessibility to people, especially to my clients who live an hour away from me and have kids and have jobs where they need to be, kind of on call, or they need to be within like 20 minutes of their work or whatever it may be. This allows people to, be in a separate room while their kids are doing something else. It gives a level of accessibility that I'm really thankful for.
I'm curious what you think is the difference between when you work with children and when you work with adults.
That's a good question. I have really transitioned to working. So I worked with kids for a really long time. I was a Hebrew school teacher. I did a lot of similar things to what I'm doing now. A lot of social emotional learning. A lot of art projects. And that's where this started. Was I noticed this need for play, this need for experience isn't ending with childhood. And we don't often, so we talk about the unfinished project. That is play. The unfinished project is play. And when we're kids, we don't have capitalism beating down our throats in the same way, saying, you need to produce something, you need to make something, you need to be productive. And we often feel a lot of guilt and shame, especially as neurodivergent people, about the amount that we get done. It becomes all about how productive we can be and optimizing that. And it's why I really encourage us to play. I think it's one of the most beautiful ways we can spend our time. And to answer your questions, there are a lot of differences, but I will often do really similar activities with kids and adults, depending on the biggest question that I ask myself when designing activities for adults or kids is, one, it's very specific to the person, which is how much room for imagination is helpful to them. So some folks really don't do well with, it can be anything. Make it anything you want. Get creative. They feel stuck. And so a much more narrow, here is the room and the container we've created for this. You can use colored pencils, markers, or watercolors. What do you think? So going through it step by step and smaller is going to be helpful. And I do this with kids and adults. With kids, there is a lot less focus on talking
Mm-hmm.
because
They don't know what to say, probably,
children,
right? Like,
no, and it's not the way they move through the world.
Yeah.
And so it is, I start off children, adults, teens, all the same way, though I am exclusively working with adults now. But when I did work with kids and teens, I also like to start them off with the feelings wheel. It's really important to me that we acknowledge that not every day is a happy day. And we talk about how much of a struggle the question, how are you, is, right? Because it's more like hello, right? It's, I'm good, how are you? I'm good, how are you? And so I not to ask people, how are you? I will often say, how has your day been so far? Or how are you feeling today? Or where would you like to start today? Because how are you doesn't really lead us anywhere productive. And so with kids, we will talk about, I will kind of let them steer the ship. So some kids would really enjoy, like, can I show you this? Can I show you this? Can I show you this? And I often wanted to provide that space for them. And I would say, we have 5 minutes. I would love to see you perform this song, right? Or I would love to see your new toy. And because I want to give them a space in which they are appreciated and where their expertise matters, right? They are an expert in so many things and they just don't get the opportunities to show it. So having that space is really important to me to show them.
It's really lovely. So Shoshana, what is when you look at your sort of arc with art therapy, is there ever a point where you feel like you have a practice on your own, or is this a relationship that's the most important piece for you?
I think it's a little bit of both. I find that what I have learned is that I deserve the time to practice on my own.
Yeah.
And so like um, I have learned what things in my life are actually me doing these things. Like when we're talking about unfinished projects, right? I used to think, oh, I can't buy new stuff for a new creative hobby because I have all these unfinished ones. When actually what I discovered through all of this is I go through like a cycle. So I will be really into crocheting. I'll be really into cooking, then rock painting, then coloring, then writing. And it'll sort of just spiral around for a few weeks or months at a time. And so it has made me feel so much better about that because I don't like my crochet. I haven't touched it in months, but when I do, I can just pick it right back up and keep working on whatever project I was doing. So I feel like it's given me, like I said, she's in my head all the time.
Yeah.
But it's given me that space and like that, I don't know, compassion for myself to give myself permission that I need to do these things and take that time for myself. So I have like a whole art section in my basement office, but I still like my Friday 1 hour session it's an anchor in my week.
Yeah.
And it's the end of like the school week. It's not the end of my work week, but it's the end of like the week for my kids or whatever has been going on. And very often I need to decompress about all of the things that have happened this week. And I'm so glad that it's opposite of when my talk therapy is, which is on Mondays, right? And so it's spaced out in a way that like it can meet that need. And then I can go into the weekend a much lighter person and be much more present for my family, which is what I want.
So valuable.
So if somebody that's listening wants to try this, obviously we'll make sure that they know how to get a hold of you, Andrea. But how would they also, I mean, you're one person, so you can't take on everybody. How can
Sure.
somebody find this type of work with someone else? Would they, where would they start?
That's a really good question. I do think that there are art therapists out there. And I also recognize like a lot of my clients use the phrase art therapy because I'm still kind of looking for the language. I've landed on creative healing facilitator, but I think it's a lot easier for folks to say art therapy. I do think that art therapy does offer a lot of this. And even though I'm not a licensed art therapist, I do think there are licensed art therapists out there that would absolutely bring similar things to the table.
So how did you find out about Andrea, Shoshanah? Like I know you said through your kids, but like, how did you find out that she did this work?
My talk therapist
actually
referred us over. Yeah.
Okay. So that actually might be something too that somebody could ask. Do you know anyone that does something like this?
Absolutely.
And see if there's anyone available. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
There's something so powerful about working with someone who is an artist and that's kind of what I'm hearing in your relationship. Like it's both that the act of finding that sort of kinesthetic release is one thing. And the other is actually developing new skills that you're learning in this relationship to become more confident in your ability to express that emotional part of yourself. Is that a fair assessment, Shoshanah?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of these things on my wall were like techniques that she taught me how to do. Like today we're going to learn how to draw a flower. We did like an autumn tree one time where we talked about blending colors. And those things those are weeks when I'm like, I don't really have anything to talk about. And which is not often. And so I take all of that and bring it into these other projects that we do because I'm like, yes, that's what I see in my head, but I didn't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so it takes some of that frustration out because I now have a little bit of a skill and, or I have the permission or the suggestion of, well, what happens if you do this? And then I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could do that.
So cool.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, right. I didn't know that was the thing. This is, the whole conversation to me is a celebration of the unknown. I don't know that I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I don't know that I didn't know any of this stuff existed before I actually tried this technique or put this particular type of crayon to paper, that kind of thing.
My husband especially feels like that. Like my husband he plays guitar and piano and stuff. So he is a musician. He's a speech therapist too, right? And so language and music is the only art that he ever thought he could do. And watching just the I don't know what happens in their sessions, but watching the transformation on the outside of him coming to me, just like my kids do, being, look what I made today. Yeah. I can't believe I could do this. I didn't know I could do this. And I was like, well, you're great in the arts. Like, of course you have it in you. And like Andrea always says, we're all artists in our own way. And so, I think it's been really fun to watch from the outside too, of somebody else experiencing it.
Well, that's just lovely.
Thank you guys so much for being here and talking about this.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
It's an honor.
Shoshanah Blaiss, grateful recipient of art therapy and practitioner extraordinaire, and Andrea Krakovsky, both here with us today. Thank you guys so much for your participation. Links in the show notes. Andrea, I make sure I have this right. AndreaKrakovsky.com is the best place for you.
Yes, and stellar pronunciation of my last name, I might add.
Nicely done.
I doff my hat to you. Thank you. This has been really fun. And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We sure appreciate your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to the show, please head over to the Show Talk channel in our Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. And thank you to the Text Expander team for once again so graciously sponsoring this show. We appreciate all of you too. On behalf of Andrea Krakovsky and Shoshanah Blaiss and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.